Hello and welcome to the 13th Scouching Report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at MODO left-handed defenseman William Wallinder, who is, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating prospects likely to go in the first round of this year's draft. Wallinder was most recently ranked 14th among European skaters by NHL Central Scouting, and I think that there is a chance that at the end of the day, he very well could be one of the best defensemen to come out of this draft in a few years. He's young, he's big, and his skating is exceptional for someone with the qualities that he has physically. So let's dig into just what makes him such an enigmatic player for this year's draft. So if you've never seen the Scouching Report before, the way that we break down a player is we look at 5 separate categories: think, move, get, pass, and shoot. Within each one of those categories, we give them a number and a letter grade, where the number from 1 through 4, with 1 being the highest, indicates the overall tier of talent that I saw within that trait over the 7 games I tracked, and the letter indicates the overall consistency within that tier that I saw in those 7 games. First, we look at the think category, and I'm going to pose a question to you before we get into this. What day of the week is it? If you flip a coin, is it heads or tails? Because it really felt to me that that's what decided how good or how poor William Wallinder was on the ice in general with his approach to the game. So we'll start with the good part on Wallinder. Wallinder is an exceptionally mobile and at his best, very, very intelligent defender. Bundling together his mobility and his aggressive offensive mindset was both a blessing and a curse for MODO's junior team this year in the Super Elite. He started the season a little bit more passively than I would have liked with a defenseman with the kind of mobility that he has, but he was more offensively productive in the first half of the season relative to the second half. But his play in the first half of the season earned him a call-up to play with MODO's men's team in the Allsvenskan, where he was the youngest player to play multiple games in that league this year. He seemed to capture a much more conservative version of his game while playing with the men's team, and that was indicated by a defensive catalyst rating of plus 21.5% playing with the men's team. And it wasn't like he was playing a minute and a half on any given night. He was playing really solid minutes on that team as one of the youngest players in the league, and for a player that shows tremendous aggressive offensive tendencies in the junior leagues, to put up those kinds of numbers defensively in the men's leagues really leads me to some interesting avenues of thought for him. He's dynamic, he can play at both ends of the ice relatively well to a competent level in the very least, and when he starts getting his brain going and starts getting his feet going, he can be a very, very tough player to stop moving up the ice. Wallinder is an exceptional rushing defenseman. He controlled offensive transitions 74% of the time, which is really staggering, especially for a defenseman. And when he was at his best, he really knew how to pick his spots. He could read the neutral zone really well and find avenues to cut through defenses and get into the offensive zone. He could spot teammates, and if he couldn't spot a teammate where he was comfortable making that pass, he would go D to D and try to open up the ice a little bit. There was a lot to like when Wallinder was at his best for sure. He completed 79% of his passes over the 7-game sample I took, which is a really remarkable number even for a defenseman. He's willing to be conservative with his passing and not really push the envelope a little bit too much like some defensemen can. He's able to spin off forecheckers and create space for himself to find more conservative passing options, and he's really focused on possessing the puck and keeping it moving up the ice with control, whether it's on his own stick or a teammate's stick. He really tried to do that night in and night out. And one thing that really did change in his game before going to the Allsvenskan and after coming back was his willingness to get a little bit mean in front of the net. He was really trying to antagonize opponents a little bit, and while his frame is still a little bit wiry and he could do to build some more strength, he really brought the mindset of, I'm not going to let you hang out in front of my goalie for a tremendous amount of time. On the downside, what I just said was also extremely inconsistent. There were real moments where William Wallinder was more like William Wanderer. He would wander around the defensive zone far too much and abandon his defensive coverages, leave players wide open, and just not be hard enough to beat in front of the net. And with his aggressive mindset to the game, I found that especially early in the year, he could jump into breakouts way too quickly. MODO was a team that often found themselves running a 4-1 breakout. 4 players, one of them being Wallinder, pushed way up into the neutral zone with 1 defender covering the defensive zone. I'm not sure that was the best strategy considering how poor MODO did once the Super Elite filtered down to the top 10 league, but Wallinder has a real rover mentality from time to time, and that is either going to need to be something that's a little bit refined moving forward or something that tactically teams will have to work around. So in the think category, I'm giving William Wallinder a 1F. Outside of his own zone, and especially when the puck is on his own stick, That's when he really seems to come to life. He can move around the ice extremely effectively, reading options, looking around the ice, looking for teammates, whether it's an aggressive passing option or a conservative one. He rarely made poor decisions with the puck, often trying to spin off forecheckers, create space, and find teammates, and there was a lot to like about his play, especially with the puck. Downside is the inconsistencies in his own end were really staggering. The moments where he would just abandon his defensive coverage were things that will definitely need to be taken more than just a step moving forward. However, I will say that part of this might have been the team around him. It really seemed like MODO as a team had a hard time staying organized in the defensive end, and Wallinder really was a part of that, but I felt like it was a systemic issue for him. And when he went to the men's league, his numbers defensively improved pretty dramatically. So that leads me to believe that with better line mates and coaching to be a bit more refined in the conservative and defensive side of the game, I think there could be a lot of potential for Wallinder here, but you're going to need to be patient, and it might take a couple of years for him to get there, but there will certainly be work that needs to be done between now and then. Next, we go to the move category, and this is the fun part of the video. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it. He is a spectacular skater for someone his size, and it is what drew me to him so early in this season. The guy doesn't turn 18 until the end of July, and he skates better than I would say almost any defenseman available in this draft, period. Especially for someone that's 6'4" at his age. Wallinder's skating to me is truly something that you can believe in and bank on for the future. It is that good at this age, and if he can improve his agility a little bit from time to time, he could be an absolutely electrifying puck-rushing defenseman in the National Hockey League. His fluidity is really special to watch, and as a 6'4", 17-year-old who goes blue line to blue line on defense in 1.76 seconds, that is just flat out remarkable. And a good thing about the aggressive offensive mindset that Wallinder showed from time to time is, with his mobility, he's able to cover his tracks really well. He can push deep into the offensive zone and uses beautiful skating to cover back along the blue line after pinching in pretty deeply. It doesn't take him that long to make that pivot and make that move back out to the blue line, and he was doing it time and time again. And if I'm a coach, that's something that I want to nurture. I want my defensemen to be able to pinch up into the zone when the opportunity presents itself, but also be able to cover their tracks if something goes wrong as quickly as they can. And Wallinder starts with a great base to work on in that regard. So in the move category, I'm giving William Wallinder a 1B. This area of the game is truly special with him. He's perfectly capable of going end-to-end with the puck on his stick and humiliating defenders on the other team from time to time with surprisingly good skill for a player this size. He was able to create separation between him and defenders time and time again, open up space around the ice just to maintain possession of the puck and play aggressively, and it was just something that was apparent every single game and was really special to me considering the profile that he has right now. On the downside here, on defensive breakouts, his gap control was very inconsistent. Some shifts he would be much more willing to step up into the neutral zone and try to cut off breakouts, but other shifts he would be far too passive and relinquish controlled zone entries and exits far too often, and even be far too passive in his own zone and allow the opposing team to really get set up before he even challenged a player. Those are things that will certainly need to be refined over time, but I am hopeful that considering the mobility and skating ability that he has with the skill with his hands that he has, I think there's a ton of potential with William Wallinder here. Third, we look at the get category. William Wallinder is a big kid and he has a really long reach, and he's able to use it pretty effectively to mitigate breakouts defensively. He can pin players against the boards to try to shut down cycles here and there if he chooses to, but that wasn't particularly common, so something I'll be looking for out of him is being able to pick those spots more effectively and build more strength on his frame, so long as it doesn't mitigate his skating and mobility around the ice in general. He can use his reach to separate pucks from opponents and just kind of divert pucks towards a teammate in the neutral zone, which is something I really like as well. He doesn't commit too much physically in transition and separate himself from the direction of play. He tends to push pucks to teammates rather than commit physically, and it goes back to his mentality of maintaining possession no matter what, and trying to get possession back as quickly as possible when you don't have the puck. Now for the downside on the get category here. When I tracked William Wallinder at 5-on-5, he had a goals against rate per 60 minutes of 5.33. That is extremely poor. And I might have been tracking his 7 worst games for goals against here, but in my tracking work, quite a few of those goals against could be traced either indirectly or directly to his inability to be consistent with his gap control, or just plain abandoning the front of the net way too early. So with these little refinements to his game, he should be able to improve defensively naturally away from the puck in his own end. But as it is right now, there is work to do in this category moving forward for William Wallinder. So in the get category, I'm giving William Wallinder a 2D. This wasn't a terrible trait in his game. He was perfectly capable of breaking up breakouts, just not consistently. He was capable of competent defensive coverage, especially after coming back from the Allsvenskan, only some of the time. But he did improve a little bit over the course of this year, and he is still extremely young for this draft class. And while I am confident in his mobility being a large key to figuring out these issues long term, he certainly remains a project when it comes to being a rock-solid defensive player in this sport, especially when play gets ratcheted up at higher levels. Next, we go to the pass category, and this is a weird one with William Wallinder. On the surface, of all the players we've profiled so far this year, he is the most efficient passer at 79%. However, cherry-picking 3 of the 7 games that I tracked in December and January, Wallinder only managed to complete 65% of his passes. In the other 4 games that I tracked, that pass percentage ballooned to 88%. And if he were an 88% passer throughout the entire season, he would almost certainly be the best puck mover available in this draft as a whole. So what that makes clear to me is that when he's on, he's very on. And when he's off, he's extremely not. There were times where I'd catch him sending passes directly to his opponents in the neutral zone. There were times when I'd see him sending passes to not even his opponents, but nobody in particular. And it wasn't that he was a player who would dump the puck a tremendous amount of times. He always tried to move pucks along the ice to teammates, but a lot of the time, especially in those games with those extremely low pass completion percentages, he could just give possession up to the other team without really thinking things through enough. But when his head was on straight, he played smart, efficiently, and moved pucks really, really well, whether it's with his passing or with his feet. And one thing I do love about William Wallinder using his mobility is he's able to push really deep into the offensive zone and try to make a play that way. He is not afraid to challenge defenders and put them on their heels, pushing towards the net, looking for teammates around the net to try to get those dangerous chances and make dangerous passes. But that tendency slowed down over the course of the season, especially after coming back from the Allsvenskan. So that might have been a cause as to why his production slowed down after coming back from the men's league. It really felt as though they were trying to rein him in a little bit to pick his spots a little bit better and play a little bit more conservatively. So in the pass category, I'm giving William Wallinder a 1C. Over the course of the full 7 games, he completed almost 80% of his passes, which on its surface is extremely noteworthy. In the few select games where he was really on, he was by far the best passer I've tracked this entire season so far. So while there's inconsistencies here, all of his results combined still painted him as a very positive defenseman when it came to passing pucks around the ice. I think there is potential for him to remain that aggressive offensive force who can push deep into the offensive zone and drive dangerous chances there, but I do think that coaching him to be a bit more refined and use his mobility in a more conservative way and use teammates more effectively in the neutral zone isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just going to be a matter of him being able to pick his spots and read play to see what the right option is. He has all the tools in his toolbox to do pretty much anything when he's on the ice, so I'm really curious to see where this part of his game goes down the road. Finally, we look at the shoot category, and this is another interesting category for William Wallinder. 15% of his shot attempts came from high danger areas. 20% of his shot attempts came from medium danger areas. If you have a defenseman taking 35% of his shot attempts from high or medium danger areas, that's pretty indicative of the type of defenseman you're dealing with here. Wallinder is absolutely unafraid of stepping right in from the blue line and getting to those dangerous areas and letting a shot go. He had, per 60 minutes, the fewest individual low danger shot attempts of any defenseman I've tracked, and when you combine individual high and medium danger shot attempts per 60 minutes, he was almost on par with Jake Sanderson, a player that might even be going in the top 10 this year. So if you can get a player with shooting tendencies like a Jake Sanderson and the mobility that I think surpasses Jake Sanderson in the later half of the first round, you've probably done pretty well if you're looking for a defenseman in the first round of the draft. In this category, usually for defensemen, there's not a tremendous amount that I can really cover outside of shot location and shot selection. Wallinder is not a guy who I think is going to be scoring a tremendous amount of goals, but his aggressiveness and willingness to push deeper into the offensive zone to get his shot attempts was something that I do really like to see out of defensemen. I like my defensemen to play with confidence and play with aggression and keep opponents on their heels rather than just lobbing pucks from the blue line. And if he can learn how to use his natural aggression and natural tendencies to push into the offensive zone to look for more dangerous passing attempts a little bit more from the middle of the ice, then he could be a very dangerous offensive defenseman in the National Hockey League one day. I didn't really see him stepping into the slot a whole whole lot for a pass attempt, so choosing when to shoot and when to pass is something that I'd work on with him, but there certainly is a lot to like here. So in the shoot category, I'm giving William Wallinder a 1D. I love defenders who step right up into the offensive zone and try to get more dangerous shot attempts. So his shot selection for a defenseman is remarkably aggressive, and that is something that really indicates the style of play you're dealing with Wallinder, and I think it's part of what makes him such a special player. So hopefully the team that drafts him is willing to nurture that type of talent long-term and be patient with him. So wrapping these reports up, we look at the best part of a player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. The best part of William Wallinder's game is by far, bar none, his skating. For his age and for his size, it is absolutely fantastic to watch him skate around the ice when he's at his best. He's fluid, he's skilled with his hands, he's great on his edges, he can maintain possession of the puck really, really well, he's really hard to knock off, and he can go end to end without really that much of an issue. And that translated pretty well to the Allsvenskan in the games that I saw of his. He looked really good as a rock-solid defenseman, moving pucks around the ice with control and maintaining possession, while still showing brief flashes of that aggression, moving pucks into the neutral zone and moving pucks into the offensive zone. He drives offensive transitions with his mobility and his skating tremendously well, and I think that there's a lot to work with just around his skating. The good part of his game, in my opinion, is his aggressive offensive mindset. At his best, he was really able to keep opposing teams on their heels and really attack the ice with the puck on his stick. If a free-flowing NHL tactical system drafts him and tries to develop him into this rover-style offensive defenseman, I think there could be tons of potential for Wallinder here if he has teammates willing to cover for him. He's willing to jump into rushes, he has the size, the skill, and the speed to really keep up with just about anyone, and he can certainly step up in the offensive zone and get more dangerous shot attempts from there. So if he can use this aggressive mindset to spot teammates deep in the offensive zone and in dangerous areas for better scoring chances for, I think there could be a really interesting offensive defenseman here down the road. The not so good part with William Wallinder is I think he's going to be a player who will be as good as his brain will take him. His positional decision making, especially in his own zone, needs to come a long way. It was really inconsistent, and there were some really shockingly poor decisions made on his part in his own end. This might be partially due to the fact that he is so young and he was playing really major minutes on a team that wasn't really willing to cover for him defensively a tremendous amount. His gap control and transition was a little bit inconsistent, but when he was aggressive, he was very good. And his poor pass attempts were rare, but boy, they were bad. So overall, I'm giving William Wallinder a 1F. I said in November that there is a small but notable chance that William Wallinder is the second best defenseman to come out of this year's draft, and I still stand by that today. He earned a call-up to be the youngest player in the Allsvenskan as a defenseman, played good minutes, and drove pretty good results as well. It wasn't like he was in over his head and getting absolutely filled in every single game. And to me, there's all the potential in the world for a player like this if you are looking for a transition player who can play offensively very effectively. In a responsible tactical system, I think he could be an absolutely spectacular player that gets fans out of their seats. He's fast through the neutral zone, he attacks his opponents relentlessly when he's at his best, he's smart if he doesn't see that opportunity and is more than willing to use his teammates effectively to maintain possession. He completes a tremendous amount of his passes over the course of my full sample, and I think there's more than enough potential for him to be a really special defenseman in the National Hockey League. On the downside, if his positional decision making and his gap control can't really get refined, if he starts thinking too much about being too conservative and not using his best talents more often, then he could have real major issues transitioning to faster and faster leagues over time. I really think there's a chance that this player turns out to be nothing, but the chance of him being what he could be is more than worth a gamble in the first round, no question. So that's all for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon, where you get access to a bunch of visualization tools, some brand new, data sheets for both drafted and undrafted prospects, a private Discord server, and plenty of other goodies. Or you could pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. All the links are in the description below. So that's it, and thanks for watching.